Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. A very warm welcome to the Athlete Transition Accelerator, and I'm delighted that today we are joined by Robert Van Der Horst, one of the most capped and successful Dutch hockey players of all time. And Robert's going to be walking through his journey of transition, sharing some of the wisdom he's gleaned from being an elite performer on the field to becoming an elite performer off the field. So, Robert, thank you very much for your time today. I know you've had a stellar career that's taken in Olympics and hundreds of caps for your country. But if I was to throw the proverbial ball back to you and say, pull out a couple of the highlights, a couple of memories that elicit a real sense of pride when you look back at what I'm sure were a number of highs and lows over your career. What are a couple of the memories that really stand out for you?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm feeling very honored to share my story and also talk over with your experience regarding this topic. I've played for, I believe, 13 years in the men's national Dutch hockey team. Talking over highlights, the first one is always amazing. So I played my first cap in Lahore, Pakistan. It was the last tournament ever in Pakistan. It was a Champions Trophy, and it is like the Mecca of hockey is in Lahore. And it was a stadium, I believe, like over 80,000 people were there. And then we're not talking about seats, but just people were standing beside the field. No fencing, and the hockey ball's pretty hard. So if you get hit, people were proud if you got one. So an amazing experience. I will never forget that. And that was something really beautiful. A young kid on the roll who had all the freedom and all the dreams that came true were at that moment there. Playing with your heroes and contribute on the result for your country was something really special.
Fabulous.
And eventually, it turns out that you are getting more expectations for yourself, but also the people around you. At least you feel them. So, getting really into that moment that I became Junior World Player of the Year a few years later was recognition for me. Like to say, hey, I'm really good at this. They acknowledge my talent. And I can even more contribute to this game and to my team. Playing at home at my own club, I'm really a guy who plays for many years at the same club. It's family for me, so always be there every day, every time, helping and supporting my team. And my club, which is family, is something I cherish forever. So that's more like a common thing. Mm-hmm. And then, obviously playing Olympics, winning big tournaments is something, you will never forget. Sometimes the journey is shit. Sorry for that. But eventually, when you win it, you forget all of that, and that's also something that is nice. Becoming best player in the world in 2015 was also a special moment for me because I was nominated like 8 times in a row. Right. So at that time I said, okay, if I don't win it now, I will call the FIH and say, please don't ever nominate me. But then I won it, which was great. It was not a dream came true, but like something, hey, I'm just one of the best in the game. And then also bringing my team to a higher to a higher platform. They brought me to a higher platform. Which means winning, and then also get the acknowledgement of being the best is something. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience. So being on top of your game with your teammates, traveling all over the world, playing big games, big tournaments, Olympics is it's a great life.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, Robert, I'm tingling listening. I think anybody who's got any sporting passion or interest, when you're in the presence of someone that becomes the best in the world, I mean, what an accolade. And you're obviously a very modest guy, but to be recognized as the best player in the world at a sport, I think is phenomenal. So we could talk for hours about your career. Obviously, the focus of ATA is very much about helping people in their life beyond the sport. But as sports enthusiasts, as Carl and I are, we've got to be careful that we don't take up too much time talking about that. But what a career. I suppose the $1 million question for people who hear that, Robert, is so elite top of the world, literally best player in the world. Obviously, you retired a few years ago. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
So currently, I'm a business owner of Peak Potential. We are a MarTech company in the world of sports and health. And we try to, we help and inspire people and companies to, work with them to generate their online e-commerce growth goals. And that's what we do, like in performance or in A/B testing, CRO optimizations, like already the AI stuff, also all kinds of tech solutions we bring in. And for me, it's great because I have a big network in sports, sharing my knowledge regarding how to generate teams, how to work together in teams, but then also working with specialists around me is something that brings the world of sports and the world of business together. And that's what I do at the moment.
Lovely. Peak Potential, very interesting. So as you sort of made that transition out of elite hockey into your next chapter, was it a case of you knew where you were going and you went straight into Peak Potential, or has this come a little bit further down the line and there were sort of stepping stones, dipping your toe into different industries and sort of seeing where it landed and what you wanted to move into full time?
Yeah, so I retired, and then I was a little bit in between, like, okay, do I go really back into the world of sports regarding coaching, or do I go to a different industry and see where I'm good at, what I like, what I can do and what I can't do. During my career, I also worked. So I was a management trainee at a big banking company, did some entrepreneurial activities. But this was more like getting towards like searching around, looking around where I'm good at. And then eventually I came up in the first day, like, okay, I'm not really the guy who's loved to work in corporate environments, but then still didn't really know where I was really good at. So it has been a big search. I'm now, I think, 5-6 years further. And I'm now in my third term of, okay, where am I now, and which industry do I like, what do I do where I'm really good at. So that's something that has been challenging, very challenging. I'm still coaching in elite hockey, but then in an assistant role, and that's something I really have a lot of passion about. And that's also sometimes a struggle, like, are you staying in your sports, or do you really want to step out? Where's your passion towards, where are your ambitions, or the other way around? And that's still a challenge.
And that, I think you've struck on something there, Robert, which is always powerful to reinforce, that I think a lot of athletes put themselves under pressure and expect that they can close the page on one chapter in their career and step straight into the ready-made perfect role in industry. And a few times, as you expanded on that point, you talked about finding what you like and indeed what you don't like. And you said, perhaps that corporate environment is not necessarily for you. And I think that's an important message, to be confident and bold enough to explore, to go and see what you do like and don't like, because it's a strange thing to say, but for many elite athletes, your career post sport will be far longer than your career in sport, and therefore it makes sense that you may have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 different roles until you find what you're really passionate about. So the fact that you've explored and dipped into different areas, I think is powerful, Robert, because it shows that you've got to go out there and find what resonates, what you like and what you don't like.
That's spot on. It's also still a challenge, and the what I mean about that is that you are on top of a mountain in an industry, which means, in my case, it was hockey. I was in 2015 the best player in the world, and in 2016 they didn't need me anymore, so I pulled out of the program there. So then you are, okay, what's next? Okay, yes, I did some work, but I'm going to search and explore where I'm good at. But you have a lot of experience. I think elite sportsmen are really smart, because they need to transfer all kinds of thoughts and emotions on like a split second. Like, if you score a goal, you're also looking, where's your family and how would your coach react? And you look at the opponent and maybe the referee thinks something about it. Now these days there's VAR, which wasn't in my time, but yeah, you need to process a lot. But in business-wise, it's different. It's slower. It's more thoughtful. It's high performing as well. Also in the business I'm at the moment now, but it's different, and that's a challenge. That's still a challenge because you need to have, an elite sportsman. It's all about dopamine somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have the feeling like, okay, I'm getting this dopamine in me, and it gives me a lot of energy, and I really like it. And there we go. But when you stop playing in that industry or in that sport and you go towards a different life, you miss that 100%. And that's always a challenge. So first of all, it's a knowledge thing for me, and also like, okay, what do I want to learn? What do I really like? But on the other side, also like just the simple way of where do I get and give my energy on, and that's a challenge. That's an everyday challenge. And now I'm like 6 years further on, but it's still a challenge.
Yeah,
yeah.
And there's a couple of great things in there, Robert. I think just go back to that. Two things I want to pick up. One, the dopamine hit. So I'll remember to come back to that. The other bit was the being world's best player in 2015 and then not required the following year. What did that do to your thinking? Did it do anything to your thinking about preparing for life beyond the sport? Because what we find with a lot of the athletes we talk to is that there tends to be some form of a catalyst. Perhaps it's an injury, perhaps it's a protracted contract negotiation that doesn't materialize as they wanted to. And it starts to give them a glimpse of their own mortality, I suppose, that actually I need to think about life beyond the sport. So in that moment, when you had that disappointment and that frustration, how did you utilize that? Did that start you thinking about what you want to do beyond hockey, or was it still too early in the piece for you to be thinking like that?
No, it was still too early because I said at that moment, like, you don't choose from me when I retire. So I kept on playing. I got even more focused in trying to be the best. And like have this proof to the rest of the world, like, hey, I'm still here. I really want to make the difference. But I knew I had no chance anymore to come back in the national team. But I said to myself, I'm not gonna let it down. But I also started to become more vulnerable. And that's because I was getting more insecure, always looking for positive feedback, which I didn't get because the story was there. So it was the story of, in this case, the head coach and his program, and my story. So yeah, I couldn't really get back in that vibe. But personally, for me, I was only like, I'm gonna make sure you guys just don't. You just have to choose me, more or less.
Yeah.
And that's something that was really onto focus, and I wasn't really into, okay, but what's next? I did some entrepreneurial activities, try to work on my business, but eventually every focus and every moment, like, okay, I can work with hockey, I went for it 100%. There was always that full dedication. So really daring to let that go and bring it towards a different industry of a second life. And maybe I can tell you a little bit on later on, but that's very confronting for yourself, because you always pull back on the fact that a year ago you were standing in Argentina and you were one of the best in the world. So yeah, it's a hard process. So for me, the only focus was, I go for sports, I go for hockey, and I will show them that I do care.
And how much longer did you play beyond that point? Because I think one of the things we hear a lot about attributes, we try and encourage athletes to think about attributes that have served them well on the field that they can take forward into industry. So there's a classic example of you dealing with adversity, could have destroyed your confidence, pushed you into your shell, say, okay, maybe this is the end. Actually, it emboldened you, it fired you up, it motivated you. And that ability to deal with adversity and keep performing at a high level is a skill that definitely translates into industry. So from that disappointment, how much longer did you continue to play, which I suppose validates your belief in yourself?
I believe 2 more years.
Great.
2 more years I played.
Perfect.
And then the funny thing came that I said, okay, I think it's now time to retire, because then I choose it for myself. And then the funny part was that my club where I was playing asked me at that moment, hey, but aren't you willing to coach this team? So I went straight away from player into coach. So I kept on sort of a leader of industry, but then in a coaching environment where I just straight away came out of a playing environment. So I was the coach of my own friends at some point. So there was very nice for me also to explore, like, okay, what's coaching all about? How can I really make a difference beside being on the pitch, which was confronting. But then also on the same hand, looking over, okay, where is the next phase of my life going? And that's what I just mentioned before. Is it still into hockey, or do I go into a different industry or a different role of business? And that was
And that's the dopamine hit, Robert, that you alluded to. And I was curious how that coaching came about. And thank you, you've articulated that, because that gives you that, potentially, without putting words in your mouth, that emotional high and that buzz that you had as a player. You're still connected to it through your coaching capacity.
Yeah, 100%. And the funny part with that is when you play, there's coming energy out of your body. You get tired physically as well, but on a coach base, it's different. It's you've reflected later on. So the first time in my life, I was sleeping when I lost the game, I wasn't sleeping on a Sunday night because all the emotions just dropped out. And I never had that as a player.
Mm-hmm.
So being in bed, overthinking in bed, being awake is something I never had as a player. But now, since I retired and being a coach, but now also being a business owner, I have it more often. It's funny. And so I start reading, I start meditating a bit just to get more like you have a really fast dopamine, which you get if you take your phone and you start swiping. That's fast dopamine, but it's also in sports. Like I already said, the quality of scoring a goal and getting all the attentions and stuff like that is a fast dopamine. That's where you do it for. That's where you get your high. But when you don't have that anymore, for me it was reading, meditating a bit, walking. So you generate a slower dopamine, which was for me a good solution to make that transition as being an elite sportsman towards just a normal person who still wants to have that feeling. And now 6 years later, I'm still not there, but it's getting there.
It's a work in progress. And there's so much great stuff here, Robert. It's making the mind ping around. But when you go back to that moment of transition, I think you've illustrated one of the real challenges, that loss of the dopamine hit. But when you wind the clock back, perhaps this was softened a bit because you were still connected to the sport. But if you go back to that window of transition, what would you say was the biggest challenge for you at the point of which that you were no longer going to play at that level and you were stepping away from being Robert, the elite hockey player?
Confidence was for me a theme, and the reason why is I had friends which were on the same age as me, and they were already some business owner or a director, or I don't know, they were like an industry leader, becoming an industry leader. Me with the same age and maybe even more experience than them regarding working with teams, playing in high level. You miss a certain knowledge and experience in a different way, and that's something that was really confronting for me. The athlete isn't there anymore. It's just now a guy who was an athlete before, and he still thinks like, okay, I'm just move on and just in all kinds of confidence I say, hey, this is me, this is what I can do, blah 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 blah. But you lack a little bit of knowledge, to be honest. And that's you still have a lot of knowledge, obviously, but you lack the knowledge regarding the industry specific segments.
Yes,
that gave me just like less confidence. But on the flip side, people said, yeah, this is the former athlete, so the expectations are pretty high. But you are working in a different industry, and then it's conflicting. It was very conflicting for me.
So the issue there that you've articulated really well, Robert, is that loss of identity. We hear athletes talking a lot about this, that as they step out of that elite world, they're no longer the Robert, the Dutch international hockey player in your case. And the natural impact is confidence. And I think it's, again, I really appreciate your candor expressing that point, because for so many people, they wrestle with this internally and they think that, well, there's something wrong here. There's nothing wrong, because somebody of your stature had exactly the same emotions, that when they stepped out of being at the top of the world, there was an impact on your confidence. So I think that normalizes that emotion, that everybody's going to wrestle with their identity. I think, again, without putting words in your mouth, perhaps being connected from a coaching capacity is a logical way to help soften that, because you are no longer just evacuating from all hockey, you're still connected. But how to address that confidence issue, Robert? How would you say you went about building your confidence? Was that a case of conversations about going out and networking, seeing what was out there, starting to recognize that some of your abilities were transferable? How did you move from that position where confidence was low to where you are now, where confidence is higher?
Yeah. So to address on that, I believe an athlete dies twice in his life. And I know I heard it somewhere at some point a few years ago, and for me that's spot on. That's spot on. For me, the hardest part was that I was still into hockey, so it was for me like a longer process. If I would ask myself now, what would you do at that moment with all the knowledge you have now? Is just step away from hockey straight away, because then you really can make your next phase, or you choose to just stay into hockey in this case. And now I forgot your question, to be honest.
No, the confidence. So it's another great prompt there, because there's another question we'll probably go into there that made me think. But before we go forward, let's go back to confidence, because there's no magic pill. Nobody can say take this and you're confident.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting just to hear how you went from saying, I'm looking around, I see my friends, they're business leaders, we're a similar age, I feel a little bit lacking in confidence. What sort of things happened to allow your confidence to grow?
Yeah. So for me, a big key was to be open and have the ability to learn, be keen to look over different opportunities, but also to look over just new things. And that's something that's a little bit double. Going over new things also gives us sort of dopamine feeling, because everything is new every time.
Yeah, progress.
Fine. Yeah, but it's also a threat. So what I said to myself, okay, I need to learn. I just want to learn. And stepping into an industry or into a job or talking with different industry leaders gives you more or less a feeling like, okay, this is a course where I would like to go in, want to learn from that. And then you see straight away that the values you created in, for me, being a team player in hockey and also being a leader in hockey, is directly also adding value, because that gave me confidence. So having the experience and the values of being a leader in sports generate automatically also extra experience for the company or the business you are working in, because others maybe have a lot of knowledge which you can learn from, but on the other side you generate a lot of experience out of a different aspect, and sports is always easy to talk about, and it's really easy to get it in front of people. And that's why it gave me confidence just to share that experience as well. And then you create this combination of one specialist knowledge based people in industry, and then also a team player who knows, okay, what will happen between us as a team or each individual under pressure, and how we can work, and what do we miss, and and then you add straight away value to that, and that raised my confidence.
Perfect. No, it's a great answer, Carl. I'm hammering it. Robert's firing my brain left, right, and centre. Let me bring you in here.
Sorry,
it's my brain's going all over the place as well. I think I want to dig into the attributes in a little bit more depth, because you've just spoken about the ability to learn and learn pretty quickly, take in information, and it's something we talk about quite a lot when James and I are having meetings within ATA. About what is it that has made an elite athlete, and how they are very simply transferred over into industries and other roles, but it's not really spoken about. And you've just hit on something really key there when you talk about teamwork, because it's not a simple thing to do. It's a skill that's learned over time, how to integrate within a team and how to pull people together. And I'd like, if you can, just to dive into that in a little bit more depth, because you mentioned there you realized you were missing industry knowledge, but you quickly realize people already have that within the company. I don't necessarily need to know that straight away, but what I can bring is all of my expertise of how does a team work? How can you instill values to make sure we all come together? Would you just expand on that and your area of expertise in that area in a little bit more depth?
So for example, now in the company we have a management team of 6. One is really specialist. He's a CTO. Then we have a CMO, I'm obviously the business owner. Then there's also a CEO. There are different business owners, and we all work out of our own specialism. And that's fine. But when you talk over your specialism, you're always leading the how do you say this? The point of your industry is something you always will talk about. So let's make it even cleaner. In this case, a CFO, he's like a really structured guy, talking over numbers, thinking over numbers, and he talks a different language than a CMO, for example, who's in the market, who's creative, who's strategically very inspiring there as well. Then you have business owners who are only in terms of sales; they are trying to work selling stuff like that. And these are all different silos who are standing in the same room, having different expectations, but also knowing that they need to work together. But sometimes they just don't know. And then you come over in terms of communication, like, I think, in my opinion, it's like this. Yeah, but I think it's, in my opinion, like this. But okay, let's step aside of that. Why don't we just go out of the context, go somewhere else, and just talk over, okay, but who are you as a person? What drives you as a person? What are your vulnerabilities? Where do you, let's say, where do you lack quality when you're under pressure? How can I help you? How do I know when you're under pressure? So you start more or less in terms of a relationship, personal relationship, than over a professional relationship. And that's something you can make really hard and just talk over it. But you can also just start, throwing out some leashes or some hooks. I don't know what you call it, but bringing them together, knowing and understanding each other, what is needed to be the best team as you can, and what is the contribution you're going to give as an individual, and what will happen if you give some certain behavior. What does that do with the other guy? If you start noticing that from each other, then you really start to connect. So that's something, for me, it's really just normal. I walk into a room and I can see straight away, okay, you have person A and you have person C. That's not really clicking. And you just feel it. You just see without saying any word, and just to get that understanding towards a team and towards individuals, from a specialist point of view to a strategic point of view, is something that is, for me, is common sense, but it really adds value towards management teams.
And I think that's a really superb articulation, Robert, because one of the phrases that I've heard, it's not mine, but I like it. Common sense isn't always common practice. So I spend a lot of time in one of my other businesses coaching within business with certain leaders, and communication and teamwork is often the blind spot. People are focused in their silos, as you alluded to. They're focused on this is what needs to happen, and they just try and bulldoze forward without the awareness of how does this interact with the people around me. And another point that was very pertinent is understanding your colleagues as people, because the best teams in sport, as we know, it's not just about life on the field and then we click a switch and with no interest off the field. You get to know people, you get to know their families, their partners, their children, and that helps you pull together as a team. It helps you find higher levels of performance when you're under adversity. So what you've alluded to there, I urge every elite athlete that's listening to recognize that you have an ability to develop teamwork. You have an ability to bring different perspectives, different backgrounds, different intellects, different age profiles, social backgrounds, whatever it may be, and find harmony as a team. That is something that invariably is lacking in a lot of industry. You have highly skilled people, but they're not necessarily coming together as a team. So the fact that you gave such a powerful articulation is wonderful to hear, because right off the bat, with limited amount of preparation, a lot of elite athletes can say, well, I'm pretty good at that. I can read a room, I can read a dynamic, I can bring people together. And something else I just want to throw back at you on that, Robert. How do you find communication? Now, I don't want to lead you directly into the same conclusion that I think you'll get to, but sports people are pretty good at communicating directly and candidly and honestly to assess the performance and identify ways to improve. They look at a game review and say, this was good. Robert, you did this well. Robert, you did this badly. This is how we're going to develop. Obviously, you're now in that coaching space, so you're delivering a lot of that feedback. In my experience, industry's still got a long way to go. In a lot of cases, they're not as good at giving and taking critical feedback for the greater good. What are your thoughts on that? Because it sounds like you've got strong communication skills that you'll have honed in sport that you're now trying to bring into industry as well.
Good question. Let's say the directness of communication in sport is something that really has value. I think in different working industries, it's not the same. So as I experienced, yes, I can be direct in my feedback, in my let's say, okay, that's high profile, high performance sport. I'm working with teams together. You go to the left, you say, let's go left. Everybody goes left, and then something happens, and it's right or wrong, and then we go back right, and it's just high performing. You just do it. You just go.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn on the spot. You learn every time. In business, it's something different because your processes are longer. There are more systems, toolings around you where you just, it's slower. It's slower. Therefore, it's hard to sometimes just like really get something done, because you need to be a bit more careful to get really to something you want. But you can. So I think it's a different question, but my general feeling says, for me as a person, I really see the dot on the horizon every time, and I'm the flexible guy who say, okay, now go right, now go left. Let's see what can work and what doesn't. But I always see that dot on the horizon. And if you talk in business, you have your own job, you have your job description, and you stay in that job, you stay in that small bubble. And that's something in terms of communication where I say, hey, business can really learn from this. Are we always looking in towards job descriptions, or do we dare to talk more about roles? So what is your role? What is your responsibility? And where can we help each other regarding a common responsibility? So let's say I'm the right defender, and my left attacker, he's ill. I should know as a right defender straight away that I need to fill in his position. And what are the do's and don'ts? What are the qualities that needs to be held on? Where do I need to feel that responsibility to take that over? But also the other way around. So that's something where I truly believe in. Also looking over, I will give you an example regarding goalies. It's in my mind now. So if it's fine for you, I share this.
Of course.
Yeah.
So for me, a goalie, if I look over in business and terms also regarding communication, a goalie is most of the time also an entrepreneur. So when I talk a lot to entrepreneurs, I always ask them, what kind of position were you when you were in team sports? And they always, a lot of times I hear, I'm a goalie. Yeah, well, how is that possible? And then I got this small theory about it. It's like a goalie always see in sports threat coming to him. He needs to have people in front of him which he needs to coach, because if they are making a mistake, it will all come to him. Then if he makes the mistake, it's a goal against. So he's always looking for the danger, get people in the right position to make sure everything is settled. So it's a safe environment to be successful. And he needs to rely on people around him, and he needs to be in communication also really direct and sometimes pretty hard to make things clear. Otherwise, he will get, in my case, a hockey ball over 120K in his helmet. So which is dangerous. So it's funny. If I look also in coaching in sports, I never see a striker as a successful manager. How is that possible? He always has the game in his back instead of having the game in front of you. Just
interesting. No, it's a great analogy.
Talking over communication.
It's a great analogy, Robert. I love it because one of the analogies that ties into, I see a lot of people that move into senior leadership positions, but then they start putting pressure on themselves that they should have all the answers. And these team analogies are very powerful, because as your analogy with the goalie there, the goalie's not trying to make every tackle. He's not trying to run the length of the field and stop the attack. He's making sure he's got good people around him or her and communicating in a way to make sure they do the jobs well. That's no different in industry. Just because you step into a senior role, you are not expected to know every facet and be a performer in finance, marketing, legal, tech. You've got to find your area of expertise. You're the goalie, but then put good people around you. So I love these analogies.
Put them on the shield and raise them. Make them very, very, very important.
Exactly. I love it. And so already, in this quick conversation, we've talked about teamwork, we've talked about communication. I think drive's another area. You alluded to it when you had the disappointment 2015 and 16. And then obviously, as you were stepping into industry, you talked about the thirst for knowledge and learning and wanting to get better. I think that inherent desire to improve that serves so many elite athletes is another transferable attribute that will serve them. Would you agree with that, that your drive and that desire to improve in sport is what is now helping you push forward in industry?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Always keen to having that learning mindset is something which you have to. That also gives you the opportunity regarding that transition, that you start to learn, like, what do I really like and what do I don't really like, where I'm really good at, where I'm not really good at, and where can I add value, and where can I get other people in their strength to make sure that they are going to be successful there as well. So yeah, I really do. To be honest, I'm like 6 years further on, and I'm gonna be really transparent now. Sometimes I'm still in doubt. Sometimes I just still don't know, and that's always the love of the game, always the love of that life. And you mentioned before as well, it's only, for me, it was only 20 years of professional hockey and 13 years with the national team, but it still is only a part of your life. And to get really rid of that life, if you want to, obviously, or just if you can let it go to be a better person or a different person in your second life regarding your working life, is something that's still a vulnerability for me.
Yes. And that, again, I'm jumping on that point, Robert, because it's so powerful for people to hear. One of the popular phrases in modern day society is imposter syndrome, and you hear people use it a lot. And I always say I don't really believe in imposter syndrome. I think what happens is if we put ourselves in areas where we're trying to grow, we will feel uncomfortable. So for you to say 6 years in, I still feel this emotion is very natural for somebody who has a desire to grow and improve. The first time you stepped on a hockey field will have felt more uncomfortable than when you were close to retirement. But the first time you stepped into the international fold, it will have felt uncomfortable until you got familiar with that. And so in life, I think every time we test ourselves and we go into something new, we feel discomfort. We feel a little bit of a dint in our confidence. But that's a good thing, because the only way to avoid that is we'll stop growing. Don't ever put yourself in uncomfortable places. Don't try and learn. Don't try and grow. Those feelings will go, but then you'll start to get consumed with regret at not actually fulfilling your potential. So again, I think it's really powerful for people to hear that with all of your expertise and this successful transition post-hockey, you still have feelings where sometimes you feel, a bit uncomfortable and a bit uncertain.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you for your very well English spoken words.
Well, as we said before we started recording, Robert, I have the utmost respect for anybody that speaks more than one language. So the fact that your English is so good is to your credit. A phrase you used a couple of times earlier on in our discussion was do's and don'ts. And I'm going to use that as a reference to look back. Now, obviously, there are a number of people that are listening that are still involved in sport. Some will be in hockey, some will be in different sectors. But the whole premise of what we're trying to do is help people transition successfully out of sport into industry and to accelerate their learning by listening to experienced people like you. So if you had the proverbial time machine, Robert, if you could go back and look through your whole career, what are some of the do's that you would recommend people in any sport to do to prepare for a successful transition? And if anything comes to mind, what might be some of the don'ts that you would say, try and avoid doing this to increase your likelihood of a successful transition?
Big question. If I look back to my younger self, I would say keep on having that focus and that dream, because there's a reason why you start playing. There's a reason why you do this. There's a reason why you are here. So chase it, like it, love it maybe more. So do that more. The older you get, the more the more you create your platform. So it's getting more serious. You are getting more serious. You sometimes forget how special it is where you're at this moment. Sometimes you are so hard in trying to be the best that you forget the things behind you, behind and around you.
Mm-hmm.
So that strong focus is something. Do that, go for it, love it, enjoy it. But be careful about the people and the processes around that. And the reason why I say this is that eventually everybody starts believing in themselves. That means if you start believing in yourself, people around you also start believing in that. So let's say parents, let's say brothers and sisters, and I'm going to be careful now, but it is. And they're starting to live that life as well a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get sponsors behind you, then you got agents behind you, then you got maybe contracts behind you, and then there's that bubble of success, which is something really good. That's your focus, that's your story, that's all you. But yeah, and I experienced when they don't need you anymore, your king is dead, and there's straight away a new king. Everybody forgets that, and so that's why I would say to that young guy as well, enjoy that moment, but also be aware that there's another life coming, and that means study more, give yourself time to study more. It's not only about hockey, and therefore also, and that's something I did eventually in the end of my career, more work. And it doesn't mean whatever work it is, but start doing something that gives you the opportunity in your sporting career. And I know it's time consuming, and then there's focus, you need to rest, you need to eat, and you have players around you, and I know, but at least do a course, or at least do something, some work, just explore a little bit where you're good at. Because in my sports, I'm not a millionaire. I'm not a football player. So I need to do something different. And then if you're making that transition, then you already have some experience about, hey, this is something I like or I don't like, besides study. Yeah, just start working, getting in that life a little bit as well. And then eventually your transition of being an elite an athlete towards I'm going to be another person, I'm going to my second career, is something that's going to be a little bit hybrid in the beginning, and then eventually it's more safe to make that next step. That's why I think also, and that's what I would say as well, don't play too long, because there's a reason why you play too long, and that's not the reason that you only like it. I don't believe that anymore. I thought I was, but I don't believe that anymore. It's great to have a sort of not like I'm telling you how to lead you. I'm just trying to be a supportive leader. That's something that really can contribute, because then you give the torch to someone else, and he's starting in the next phase and chapter. But on that same side, you need to work and just explore a different industry, explore a different life, challenge yourself again. Don't only say and tell what is the industry look like in sports and where you're good at and how you can make the game even better, because then it's about you and not anymore about the sport. So
perfect, Robert. Again, once again, these are just such powerful answers, because again, we talk to people on a very broad age spectrum, and what you tend to find is the people that know they're towards the back of their career are much more open about what they're going to do next. People who are in their early 20s, mid-20s, think they've got years and years ahead of them, are less receptive. And again, hearing this powerful articulation from you, it's a reminder that there is a lot of pressure on an elite athlete. You have the conditioning, the nutrition, the psychology, the recovery. But irrespective of all of that, the one luxury that you do have over most people in industry is time. Even with the most intensive training schedule and training regime, there are still pockets of time that, as you said, you could be doing a course, you could be chatting to somebody on Zoom, you could be reading a book, and it's not spending every waking minute so that you compromise your recovery, but starting to take the time. Because I think that leads into another tip you've given there: don't play too long. I have a belief, I'm just curious, and Carl and I talk about this a lot, that when people are prepared, they've done what you've suggested, Robert, they've spent time exploring what they like and don't like, they've got some clarity about what they're going to do next, they are much more open to bringing their elite sport career to an end. Conversely, when people don't really know what they're going to do, have some fear and pressure about how do I support myself or my family, they keep playing. Would you agree with that people play longer because they don't have clarity about what they're going to do?
Yeah, 100%. And it's good you bring this up, because therefore you are going to make the wrong decisions. You're going to make the wrong decisions about where do you want to go next? So you're not really choosing what you really like, but you're choosing because I need to pay my mortgage, or I have responsibility to my kids and my wife, or so you make the choices are from a different reason, and that's also a reason why people are playing longer, I think. And not really happened with me, but I see it a lot, is that these kinds of people are keep playing, but they don't get a better person of it. Also not towards other people. They getting more frustrated around those last years. And then eventually when you retire, your last 2 years are the 2 years that is more mostly in your mind as a remember. And it just floats away everything what happened before, which were the most beautiful years in your life so far. So that's something I see a lot as well. And then I don't know how you say this in English, but it's the last 2 years dominates the beautiful years before, and people get frustrated
sense.
about that.
Yeah, makes
Hopefully
perfect sense.
what I mean.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense, Robert. So just such insightful and powerful answers, Robert, in terms of people listening and reflecting on their own situation. Obviously, just interested to sort of bring things to a conclusion. When you're involved in sport, things are quite binary. They're quite black and white. We win or we lose. We want to, win a medal in the Olympics, or we want to win the league, or we want to finish high up the league. And so success is quite easy to define. We're always curious when we're meeting, influential people like you to ask, what does success mean for you now? In the chapter that you were in, it's very personal. I appreciate everybody's answer is different, but what does success look like for Robert in this chapter of your life that you're in now?
You mean as the hockey player before, or just as I am now in life?
As you are now in life. So the hockey, not as a hockey player, but now as Robert, the businessman, Robert, the person. Just, if you were to say, well, success for me, it would be X.
Yeah. Successful for me would be if I'm in a team, or in a company, or in a surrounding of people, also in family, that everybody feels they are happy, they like what they do, they challenge themselves to be a better person in work or life, or whatsoever, but always in a connection, always do it together, and then the outcome is always right. That's something for me. And as a sportsman, it's all about winning. You need to win. It doesn't matter how, just win. For me now, the journey is sometimes even powerful than the result or your outcome. So if I go home today after a nice day of work, I look back. Yeah, I look at the result of the day, but eventually I will get more happy about the conversation I had with my strategy lead, for example, and how it felt today, and how in line he was with the work that needs to be done, that he had a good conversation with another colleague where he got really inspired. So then you're talking about a journey instead of a result. And then it's about happiness, your own growth. That's more important for me these days than just talking over KPIs, results, turnovers, medals, whatsoever.
Yeah. I know why Carl had a little chuckle, involuntary chuckle there when you were talking, Robert, because literally before we recorded this interview, we were talking about the very notion of enjoying the journey and the process rather than the destination. And that in sport, it's very much right. We won, we lost. In business, as you said, it's a slower process. It can take longer. But what you've alluded to several times today is about putting people at the heart of what you do, relationships, happiness, fulfillment, how you connect with people. And that's an ongoing journey that we can all enjoy. And so I think, you've given a wonderful answer to that question as well. I think from my perspective, Robert, it's been fascinating. Carl, is there anything else you think we should cover with Robert while we've got him here with us today?
Well, I would just like to raise communication and teamwork again, because I love that those were the first two things that you went to with regards to attributes of an athlete that moves on. Because funnily enough, I can't remember his name. I was just trying to find it. He's an American psychologist or business guru or something along these lines. And he's been doing a lot of research into the failings of businesses and sort of, can you start pinpointing where these are? And funnily enough, the two things, I've got it written down here in my notes, the two main issues within a business, particularly within the commercial and sales element, is it's poor communication and teamwork, because they're not skills that can be easily taught. They tend to be more personality and developed over significant time. And that's why I wanted to bring that back, because you really nicely alluded to it, Robert. And me and James talk about this quite a lot. We don't think enough is done with athletes whilst they're in the world to highlight everything that has made them an elite athlete is perfectly transferable into industries. And actually, business leaders are crying out for everything that an athlete is and can bring to the table, because they're not teachable. You can't quickly instill these into individuals. It's something that's honed over years of trying to reach a goal, working within a team, different individuals, bringing everybody into one aligned goal. How are we going to get there? This is the goal. Here are the systems. We're going to come together as a group of individuals and we're going to get there. And I just really love that you've raised that, as this is sort of becoming a big talking point within the world of business.
Great.
Well, thank you, Robert. I think anybody who's watching this episode will see you've got a wall of inspiration behind you that cascades above and beyond the camera. But I'm hoping that people will take inspiration from. Obviously, your sporting career is very clear for people to see. They can see how inspirational that was, but also the ability to transition, the ability to try different things, to recognize that you're a constant work in progress, as Carl's alluded to really lean into those strengths you already have for the majority of elite athletes around teamwork, around communication, to maintain that drive. But to hear you talking about, retain that humility, because eventually it'll end, and take the time to learn, take the time to explore, take the time to look at things you like and don't like, to prepare so that you don't play too long and that you step into that next chapter with confidence. So a whole raft of takeaways today. Just to finish once again, Robert, a huge thank you from both of us. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure we'll be working with you in some capacity in the future, because our values are very much aligned to help elite athletes transition successfully in their life beyond the game. So thanks again.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, guys. Really nice to be on this podcast. And I feel exactly the same. As long as we can help and inspire future generations with these topics in the athlete transition accelerator, then I think we are doing a good job.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insights, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.